Hello, and a very warm welcome to this Passenger Experience Conference webinar on reducing the cabin's environmental footprint. I'm Murdo Morrison, and I'm Head of Strategic Content with Fly Global. Despite the crisis and the continuing concerns over the pace of recovery, there can be few bigger issues facing the air transport sector than climate change and the drive to create a more sustainable industry. And the cabin community has a vital role to play in delivering that. It's an effort that spans every corner of the market, from sourcing the materials and designing the interior products that can reduce the aircraft's weight, to deciding what to do with these products at the end of their life. How do we even assign value to sustainability? How do we measure progress and success? And how should we engage with passengers, many of whom are as invested in a more sustainable future as we are? So to debate these issues and more, I'm joined by an eminent panel of experts. Before I invite each of them to tell us a quick bit about their background and ideas, a quick reminder, we would love to hear your thoughts over the next hour and your questions. So feel free to submit these to our panel and indeed your own comments on the debate via the chat box, and we'll try and cover as many of these as possible. So my guests today are Brian Moran, Vice President, Global Sustainability Policy and Partnerships at Boeing Commercial Airplanes, who will be giving us the OEM's perspective. Erin McCleve, Executive Director, International and Aftermarket Strategy at Collins Aerospace, one of the biggest suppliers of seating and other cabin products in the market. From another major producer of cabin equipment, Jan Boris Philip, Head of Research System at Deal Aviation. And finally, Gary Doy, Managing Director of independent design house Doy Design. Brian, let me start with you. Lots of factors contribute to an aircraft's carbon footprint: its engines, the aerostructure, the number of passengers on it. How important is weight reduction, particularly in the cabin?
Hey, Murdo, thanks for hosting this great panel, and it's an honor to be joining this, my colleagues here. Look, the short answer is it's super important. You know, when we think about decarbonizing airspace, we often think about sort of the shiny, big, visible, the engines, the wings, the airplane itself. But equally important is every ounce matters, every gram matters. So that what's happening inside the cabin is absolutely vital. And I'm sure we're going to get into that with some of our partners today. And then for Boeing, if we take a step back, when you look at how we think about decarbonizing airspace, it's really four pillars. There's the fleet renewal, which is obvious. Just yesterday, we announced our new current market outlook that looks out 20 years, and the world will need 43,500 airplanes. So there's a lot of replacement coming up with more efficient airplanes. But the same goes for the inside. With every new generation of airplanes, there's a new generation of innovative interiors, innovative lighting, innovative seats, lighter materials that go into that. The second pillar is really operational efficiency, and I'm sure Erin can talk to that quite a bit too. Outside the airplane, it's air traffic management, flying more efficient. But inside the airplane, technology in the cockpit, whether it's innovation in catering, the way electricity is used, those all add up, as we said. The third pillar are fuels. So again, outside the airplane, sustainable aviation fuels is where we see the future. But inside, just 10 years ago, we flew a hydrogen fuel cell for APU applications. So there's innovation even inside the cabin, or the tube, so to speak, to decarbonize. And finally, it's advanced technology. I'm sure this whole panel will get into many, many examples. One that we're currently flying really quickly is on the Eco Demonstrator program, where we always fly tomorrow's technology today. And right now, flying is a sidewall, an inner sidewall made of recycled carbon fiber from the 777X production system, which we're also thinking about using that to enhance passenger comfort through noise reduction. So you can really see the link between inside and outside. And every generation contributes more to the cost. But I'll look forward to hearing from my fellow panelists on what they think.
Well, thanks, Brian. That's fascinating. Erin, moving on to you. This is a very competitive industry, but presumably reaching these sustainability goals will require collaboration among suppliers, the OEMs, airlines, and the policymakers. How do we do that?
Thank you, Murdo, and thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be a part of this discussion. I would say, first of all, we have to consider that this is truly a unique time in our industry and a unique challenge that we're all facing. And because of that, we see this call to action that comes sort of across stakeholder groups and meaning aircraft OEMs like Brian's company, airlines, investors, employees, and governments, and of course, important for today's discussions, passengers who really want to know that choosing to fly is aligned with their sort of personal principles around sustainability. And what we see, I think, as a result of that call to action across every stakeholder group is a wonderful uniformity of purpose. I know in my years in the industry, I can't think of another time where you've seen such energy around collaboration and a willingness to set aside the traditional dynamics and models, the competition, as you've mentioned. Really, I do see a strong desire to collaborate and pull together and find solutions. And we do need to accelerate that. We need more of that. You mentioned we need this across suppliers, across customers. We do need it across our governments. And I think the way to approach this is together, because it's an international industry. We can't have different regulations in different areas, different infrastructure incentives. We really do need to work together. I think the energy is there. Next comes the hard part, right? Where we really do have to put the plans in place, agree on shared goals and regulatory frameworks. And I would just say, I feel very optimistic, partly because of the shared objectives, and partly because I can't think of a single government, a single industry player, or a single industry group that is not focused on working on this together. So I do feel very optimistic about collaboration.
Great, thanks, Erin. Boris, if I can move to you. Diehl has been an innovator in many weight reducing and other environment-friendly product introductions. How important is R&D and that constantly challenging the status quo when it comes to product development?
R&D is a key at Diehl. We want to have new products which save our planet. So we need to have the inventions. Inventions take time, and this time happens in the research area. In collaboration, like Erin, you said, we are working in a lot of different national and European research programs, also in the EcoD program from Boeing. This collaboration, all together, we can do research to build up new products. We are looking in different ways to save the planet. One is also for fuels. We are looking to our contribution for hydrogen propulsion systems, especially their fuel cell cooling systems, because this is coming close to the other systems we are working for. We are looking that we have technologies which we can transfer to the new area, but also in the classical systems, we are working on constant innovations like a gray water reuse system, where we can save the hand wash water for flushing the toilets. And this, for example, Brian, you said weight is everything. We calculated for a Boeing 787, you can save up to 250 kilograms, because roughly a quarter of the potable water is used for flushing the toilet. So there are major things where we can working on the systems to save weight, and by this reducing the environmental footprint. There's one different perspective I want to bring in, and this is recycling. Also, when weight is everything and 80% of the energy is used during the flight, we also need to take care about recycling. And there we need to have a major shift in the materials which are needed in the cabin, not this complicated composite materials. We need more to go to thermoplastic materials or monomaterial solutions which can be recyclable, and in the best case, they're also bio-based.
Excellent. Well, that brings us very nicely on to what I think, Gary, you are very keen to talk about. I know that you feel that perhaps much of the focus is on purchase price and weight when it comes to procuring cabin equipment, but perhaps not enough on through life costs and the long-term impact on the environment. Can you perhaps explain?
Yeah, thanks, Murdo. Yeah, so I think we're sort of at a time of change, really, and we need to readdress a little bit what we do. And our existing models within the industry is generally based on purchase price. We're competitive. If you're lighter weight, you've got an advantage. But these two things are the kind of the big drivers, really. So that drives a certain aspect right at design stage. It forces our focus on designing products at cost and at weight, which is fine. That's how it's traditionally been. But now we've got sustainability, and if we really want to make a change with sustainability, we have to address that at a really early stage, and that's part of the design process all the way through. And the business models as they currently exist aren't focused on that. They're not focused on lifetime cost of ownership of the product. They're focused more on the early cost of the product. So what we end up with as a products, and this isn't necessarily with every single product that's in the cabin, but it tends to be that manufacturers will design the product to hit a certain weight and cost target, but to hit that target, that there's a revenue stream that comes from spares afterwards. So it inevitably, it's in the advantage to create spares in the industry, because that's a revenue stream that we hook into later on. And what that does, in my view, is that we're driving much more waste in the industry. We're creating more things that potentially break quicker, and we have to change them. And because that's part of the business plan and the business model, we're all forced into that situation. And I think we need to step back a little bit from that and say, okay, with this economy, with this kind of circular economy, how do we take a product and design the product for its life, and therefore make it efficient for its life, and use less product through its lifespan, as well as the early days when you design it. And I think if you look at the product from first principles at that, at the design stage, then we will come up with a different answer to what we have today, and it will be more sustainable.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I want to stay on that subject of through life costs and perhaps recycling. We've had an audience question in already, which is great, and please keep these coming. The question is about leather seat covers, and we're given the millions of units in use. Why are so many leather seat covers still being replaced, and should we consider the repair option? Now, Erin, obviously, Collins, you're a huge manufacturer of seats, but perhaps you could answer that, but also sort of perhaps talk about the wider implications around recycling and upcycling and all the rest. Boris, I know we talked very much about, you talked about the new product innovation, but how much is environmental responsibility to do with making sure products last longer, can be kept in service, can be recycled? Erin, let's start with you on that one.
Sure, happy to. And maybe just leading into that a little bit, I kind of want to draw on something Gary said that I think really resonates and relates to this, which is about this idea that it's about the full product life cycle, that needs to be considered truly at every stage, but in particular, I would say in the early stages and development and design, and considering that full impact of any product, and whether it needs to be replaced, whether it needs to be repaired. I know it's something as we've really embraced the call to sustainability at Collins. We've looked at building this now into business cases with estimators on the long-term carbon impact of weight reduction or power generation reduction, so that we can start to account for that, because I think this point keeps coming up, right? It has to be a part of the business model, and it has to be built into how we do everything we do. So coming back to sort of that question around seats and repair versus replace, I think at the end of the day, material technology is a huge part of the answer. I think we'll continue to refine how we repair things, but when we can repair and make sure that we have every option available to us to certainly not throw things away, to be able to recycle those things that can't just be repaired or won't be acceptable for use in their current repair state. But I do think addressing sort of the fundamental technologies of what we put there and making sure that it does last longer. And I would say that there's some good news in this. Obviously, there's advancements happening every day when it comes to material technologies to last longer and then be reusable or recyclable at the end of their life, which I think is great. I also think in some cases we need to consider that replacement is a real advantage, right? And when you incorporate a weight reduction as a great example, I know we're going to talk a lot about weight today, I'm sure, but if you can replace an older seat design with something that's new and lighter and more efficient, I think we use the rule of thumb, 1 kilogram of weight reduction on a narrow body aircraft is 1 kilogram of CO2 emissions reduction every 10 hours of flight. I think that's sort of a rule of thumb a lot of us use in the industry. That replacement, you don't have to wait for a clean sheet aircraft. You can put it in place and you can start immediately drawing down the carbon footprint of the industry while those new aircraft come into service that have maybe some of the more structural or aerodynamic changes. So definitely a lot of opportunity to do work on the very fundamental things. Back to that question, right? Why is my seat having to get repaired? Yeah, let's repair more efficiently. Let's replace with better technology, but then let's also make sure we're thinking about the impact of every seat on the aircraft and make that as little as it can be to the carbon footprint.
Brian, do you have views on how the industry can perhaps recycle or make some of the products in the cabin last a bit longer?
Yeah, look, we're putting a lot of focus on recycling, both through AFRA, the Aircraft Recycling Association, but also in partnerships like we have one with ELG, where we try to advance the technology around carbon recycling. On this very eco demonstrator program I talked about, we've flown in the cockpit, monuments and different pieces of structure produced and 3D printed from recycled carbon. We're looking at carpet tiles, so you don't have to rip the whole carpet out, but you can just take the pieces of the carpet out that are soiled. So I think, and then one fairly dramatic and very visible exercise we did was with TUI on a 757 program, where at the end of the demonstrator program, we recycled the whole airplane. And we recycled 90% of the airplane, either taking the parts, obviously, and getting those reused to Gary's point, or recycling the materials themselves. So I think it's an important focus, and it really starts where Gary also, where his roots come from, is to design for environment. You don't do that afterwards. You do it when you design each of our products, whether it's at the airplane level or at the systems level. So I think there's a lot of attention going into that, but I very much appreciate Gary's point. The one additional element I want to introduce to the conversation, though, is the aspect of safety, right? This group, this cohort, will never do anything that jeopardizes safety, and the safety standards in aviation are pretty much higher than anything I can think of. And so as we play around with trade-offs, we will never trade off safety. And so that's, I think, a very high bar we have all set for ourselves.
That's a great point. We've actually had a question on that, and I'll come back to that later. And that's really how the whole push to recycling perhaps conflicts with some of the regulatory issues that we have in the industry, but perhaps we can deal with that in a little bit. Boris, if I can come to you on that point, you talked about new product development. When Diehl designs a product, how much thought is put into how long that product is going to last, and also the potential of that product to be recycled at the end of its working life?
For system components, we try to design every component in the way that it has the full life of an airplane, so that it stands for 30 years, like a smoke detector or a waste tank. And that's the basic philosophy when we're designing a product. Sometimes it's not possible, but we try always to extend the lifetime of the products, that they will stand longer and longer. And we are looking that we can repair or refurbish components, like recoating of a toilet essay. If the coating of the bowl is not nice anymore, that you don't have to throw it away, that you can recoat the toilet essay, that it appears after a service nice again to save the energy in the end. So these are important things at deal. And also the other thing when we are looking in research is what Brian said, safety. Unluckily, it's slower. You ask at the beginning why we need so much research. There are a lot of restrictions from material sides for fire, toxicity, flame, and so on, that we cannot use a lot of materials which are used on ground easily everywhere for good applications in aircraft. So we take careful investigations that we fulfill all safety requirements and looking that we achieve this long lifetime. And that's the real challenge in research for the materials.
Yes, and that, Brian and you, Boris, have both made that similar point, and we've had a question from an audience member as well about, this industry is highly regulated. Materials are tested and compositions need to be exact. The regulator gets very involved in every aspect of every element of the interior of an aircraft and indeed the exterior of an aircraft. How much, Gary, maybe you have some thoughts on this, how much of a challenge is this for the industry when it comes to designing perhaps products with a longer life and recycling products, is convincing the regulator that they are still safe to use?
Well, I wouldn't say it's insignificant. In the experience I've had, where we have introduced some new materials into the cabin, it's taken a lot longer to verify those materials and get everybody on board, because clearly, safety is paramount. And so in our industry, if we want to introduce a new material, we have a much higher bar to jump over, and there's no doubt about that. It costs us more money, it takes us more time. However, it is possible. So it kind of comes down to the will of how much you really want these materials in. And we have introduced a lot of new things in the cabin over the years. So I think what we're seeing right now, and it's not just the aviation industry, it's across industry. Everybody's looking at sustainability. And when we come to lightweighting, because anytime you move something, it takes energy. The mass is such a big deal, so we're looking at lightweighting, we have done for years, but the auto industry, the train industry, everybody's looking at it right now. And these materials are kind of crossing over each other. So same problems exist throughout the world. And one of the difficulties that I'm seeing is that it's kind of knowledge of how we join it all up, because we all focus on developing our own products for our own customers, but at the end of life for those products, what happens to them? And can you join up with other industries? Can you join up with other people, collaborators, to take the materials on, to give them another life? And maybe that life's back in the aircraft in the future as well. So I think for me, one of the challenges we've got as an industry and as a world really is to try and join up a complex subject and make it work in a complete kind of circular way. And that's one of the that's one of our big challenges. But from the aviation perspective, I mean, we're kind of like we're the bad boys, really, aren't we? We burn fossil fuels and we carry people in the air. That takes energy. It takes a lot of energy. So we're starting off in an environment where people are thinking, aviation isn't all that good. And if you look at the generation coming through, that some of them are questioning, is aviation even relevant, in the world of tomorrow? So it's quite a big challenge for us. And we look at what we contribute in terms of emissions to the world. It's a relatively small number compared to other things, but we will be taken to task. So I think, we have to do some pretty major things, and the things that we can't have electric aircraft, hydrogen aircraft tomorrow. It's going to take some time, it will take time. So we've got some steps to make, but I think the public and our customers are expecting us to make some reasonably dramatic steps is my take on it. And I think that they're expecting us as an industry to say, look, this is how we deal with this is how we can take our materials and make them more responsible. But one of the big things is how do we change the energy that we use? How do we reduce that? And in my mind, mass has got to be one of the big drivers, because taking mass out of a cabin is really key. And I think just as my view is that if the public, at the moment, the public are voting with their feet, and people are coming up with new concepts for different things, not necessarily in our industry, but sneakers that are 100% recycled, for example, and that's appealing to the public, and people are going to buy those sneakers. So what happens if an airline comes up with a concept that is 50% more sustainable than the other airline? Maybe it costs a little bit more money, maybe it's a slightly different offering. But there's a really interesting business opportunity there. And I think, when you've got a moment of change where things are really fluid, this is where there's opportunity for people to come up with new ideas and then communicate those to the public. And I think we're going to see that.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that whole business opportunity and the consumer end of the market in a little bit. But I just want to turn back to something else, the BC era, before COVID. I've been covering this sector for a while, and attending many AIXs, and a huge trend in the industry up until early 2020 was the constant sort of reinvention of cabin products, particularly at the premium end. We saw every time somebody came up with this sort of the best sort of first class cabin, the best premium cabin in the market, someone else would come and trump it with even better suites. We've had onboard showers. We've had this is I guess is all taken a bit of a change since early 2020 with the impact on the long haul market and perhaps the business travel market. But I mean, will we see that change? I've got a question here from an audience member talking about surely as we drive towards sustainability, we can't have multi-class aircraft carrying water for first-class passengers to have showers. As we recover from this, what impact do you think the drive to sustainability will have, particularly on the premium end of the market? Will we see some changes, perhaps a slowing down in the pace of constant change that we've seen in terms of that delivering that cabin product at the front of the aircraft? Erin, do you have some views on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to offer some. I think if we look at what has been driving the designs within the cabin for as long as there's been a cabin, what we have had is passengers and airlines reacting to passengers who fundamentally needed to feel safe and wanted to feel comfortable, right? I mean, those were the things, right? That is what you need to feel as a passenger. And I think what's interesting now is maybe two new dynamics. You mentioned we're post-COVID world. What does that mean to us and what we feel as humans? It means what it takes to feel safe is maybe a little different than what it used to be. And the aspect of hygiene takes on a heightened importance that it never used to. And then you have this third pillar, which is around sustainability, which I really do think for the long term, I think this is a true shift in the industry where now our passengers are going to need to feel safe. And now that's in a different way, and still want to feel comfortable. So there's a balance to be done there, but then also need to feel that again, that choice to fly is aligned with their sustainability objectives personally, so that they can feel good about it, right? The human drive to explore isn't going to go away, and the need to be connected is not going to go away. So how can we do that in a way that makes people feel that this is aligned with what it should be, with what we all want for the world? So yeah, does that change the layout of a first class cabin? I think it will change a lot of things. I think it will change because passengers truly will need to feel different about what's being provided on board, and that aligns with principles which go beyond the pure comfort considerations. And I would also maybe just to elaborate a little bit on the safety element, because I think that is something we will absolutely see in every cabin. is a continued focus on a different level of safety when it comes to germs and viruses. And so I think we'll see this increase in contactless technologies, UV cleaning technologies, all of these things that many of us in the industry had been working on pre-COVID, right? But now see the heightened importance and relevance of that to what our passengers experience. And so I think you will see the focus of the cabin, the focus of airlines advertising around the cabin and their offering really shift to show that we're providing those types of solutions. And I think that'll really play into that overall balance.
Thanks. I mean, Brian, I see you want to come in anyway, but I was just gonna tee you up. You know, we've obviously, this is a COVID issue with the impact that it will have over the next few years on long haul travel and premium travel. But aside from that, as the industry recovers, what role do you think sustainability will have on the shape of first class and premium cabins? Do you think we will still see that constant drive to improve customer product with refits every 3, 4, 5 years by some of the leading long haul airlines?
Yeah, I cannot speak to the replacement cycles, but look, I would worry about the day where we as a sector stop innovating. Because think about what happens every time a new generation of products is introduced. There's new capability that's introduced. Boris talked eloquently about whether it's in the lavatories or in the lighting, more electric, more digital systems. You know, we're in the seat business through our joint venture with Adian. I know Gary has a lot of experience there too, and the safety standards there are rightly very, very high. But with every new generation, we're bringing in lighter materials that can handle bigger loads. And so that innovation, yes, good question earlier about when you replace the leather, but the structure of the seats, I mean, we're making noticeable improvements, just like in automotive. The cars are getting safer every generation. That's one. I really like Aaron's point on the passenger experience. And, you know, we've done a lot there and a lot of studies, and you hopefully would have witnessed that with the bigger windows and the deal lighting in the Dreamliner. But just recently we announced a partnership actually with Collins, where some of our UV technology that we developed during the pandemic is now going to be introduced by Collins as, I think it's called Lilac UV lighting, which sanitizes the cabin even further. It's already hospital grade ventilation and pretty much the safest place you can be. But for additional, additional layer of protection, Collins is going to take some of that material. That wouldn't make it into the cabin had we stopped innovating. So I appreciate the questions. No doubt sustainability is on everybody's mind. And just look at the number of tests and experiments that the airline are doing. We're doing our eco demonstrator program. Different airlines are they're trying to fly the perfect flight. They're trying to wring every ounce of efficiency out of the products, single-use plastics, thinking about circularity. I think there's a lot going on in our industry.
Great. Boris, perhaps you would like to come in on that. How do you think that the drive to sustainability will change the top end of the front end of the cabin, the premium cabins?
I think we need to combine it. The cabin needs to still look nice, and you need to feel well in an air cabin. So we need full passenger comfort combined with more sustainability. It's not either one or right-hand side, we need both. And that's the goal also for the hygienic topics. Aaron, you mentioned, we need to find hygienic solutions which provide the same comfort as classical solutions. And touchless is an example for this. It's more convenient to use a touchless lavatory than using hand handles and all this stuff. So there's a way forward. And if you make a good touchless solution, it will be even lighter than a classical mechanical solution. So we get a gain in all three directions. And that's the way we have to go with innovative products.
Okay, I want to move on to a related subject, and some of you already touched on this, and it's again, I'm going to incorporate a question from the audience in this, but you know, obviously reducing the carbon footprint of aviation is a worthwhile goal in its own right, but does the panel think that an airline's environmental credentials will increasingly become part of it, an important part of its brand message? and giving it a competitive advantage when it comes to attracting customers. So what's your feeling about this whole, how your ultimate customers, the airlines, can use the whole sustainability message to give themselves a competitive advantage? Gary, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's no doubt that is going to be, it's going to happen, and I'm sure it already is happening. We're going to see airlines looking to promote their sustainability, and I think we're going to see airlines that look at doing something quite different and seeing if they can kind of make a step change on sustainability. So I think, it's a message that their customers, us, want to hear, and there's going to be no airline that's not going to push that. That's for sure. What I think is going to be really interesting is what airlines go out there and do something different. Really start to push us as an industry to come up with new solutions that they can push to their customers, and the customers can pull from them, because I think that we're going to get a lot of customer pull here. I think we're going to find that customers are going to be saying, look, what else is there? What are my options to go from A to B, and what are my sustainable options? And they've got their eyes open on rail. They've got their eyes open on other things. So we've got competition here, and I think there's opportunity here for an airline to say, okay, stand back a bit and look at what does our customer really need. If we want to make a really sustainable product, what does the customer need? And if you look at some of the short haul products, the 2-3 hour products, do you really need to have a food service on that? Do you really need that? Do you really need to go out and buy a watch on board? So we're carrying all these things around, we're carrying extra drink around, we're carrying food, we're carrying galleys, we're carrying galley carts, and we're not using it all. This the bottom line. Of course we're not. We're carrying a lot of wasted weight. And if you're a customer that wants to really fly green, well, for me, I'd like to get on a plane and, like a bus, 2 hours, jump on the plane, I'll take my sandwich on, that's fine. And I get off the other end. I'm going to get a better sandwich at the airport than I will on board. But that's where we have to look at the business models, because, airlines obviously make money out of these products, but with collaboration, they could make money from a sandwich on the ground that goes on board. If you think slightly differently, there could be ways that make the business model work. But if you took a galley out of an aircraft and you took the galley carts out and you took the tables off the back of the seats, in a configuration which is high density, you'd have extra space for the passenger, you have more comfort for the passenger, and the passenger will fly greener. So it's not all about taking things away, you're giving things back to the passenger. And if you can articulate that well as an airline to the flying public, I think you'll have a real winner.
I'll just come on to the others. You've actually answered a couple of questions that have come in from the audience, which is very interesting. I mean, one comment rather than a question. Exactly as you said, Gary. For short haul operations, why not remove the galleys, the equipment, the carts, and so on? That would massively reduce weight, and airlines can sell food in the departure lounge. So I'm not sure if that was your comment there, Gary. I think it was someone very much of the same mind. And another interesting point that an audience member has made, and I'd be interested to hear people's views on this, and we've seen this across other industries as well, that some airlines, perhaps a slightly cynical view, but it's a view all the same. Some airlines try to claim environmental responsibility by taking away service, so you can take less bags on board. There's no catering. We're very environmental, but it's very conveniently reduced a whole lot of costs and hassle for the airline as well. So is sometimes the sustainability case just about providing a more rubbish passenger service? Does anyone want to come in on all these points? Erin, let's start with you.
I would love to jump in on that one, because I actually I think obviously the airlines have such a critical role to play here in both directions with what's communicated about sustainability to passengers directly, that sort of becomes the reflection of the entire industry and what we're providing. And then in driving requirements to providers on our side of the equation that align with that. And so I think these decisions are really critical. And I would say the idea that sustainability has to be matched with a poor experience by passengers is a huge risk, and I think one that we all collectively need to counter. And when I think about any technology that we're developing for sustainability, I can't think of a single example that goes the other way in terms of the fundamental technologies that truly make a difference. I can't think of any that makes the experience worse. And I know when we think about, and I'll reflect a little bit on some of the Collins solutions, just because that's what I know best. When I think about things to do with contactless travel and you move more quickly through the airport and efficient airport operations. So now you're sitting on the ground less, which is great for a passenger. You don't want to be sitting there longer than you have to in that aircraft, but also great for efficiency because you're burning less fuel and using less energy. The lighter weight technologies we've talked about, I defy anyone to find a next generation lighter weight seat that is less comfortable than what you were sitting in the prior generation. It's just the opposite. And lavatory and food, I'm not quite with Gary on denying water to passengers. I can't quite get there, but I do think there's efficiencies to be had there, and I think efficiencies to be had in a way that does not negatively impact, just the opposite. It makes passengers feel that they're having a better experience that's also sustainable. And then through that flight and to efficiency and flight routes and optimization, so you land sooner. Everybody wants that, and it's sustainable. And so a lot of these things that maybe we don't think about as the things immediately in sight as a product in front of the passenger, but truly impact the passenger's experience of flying and make it more sustainable. I think that's what we need to emphasize as a whole industry. This is not about making your life worse. This is about a better experience, which is also better for the environment.
Great, thanks, Erin. I mean, Boris and Brian, I mean, this whole view of it, can we achieve sustainability without compromising passenger comfort and passenger service? Brian, let's come to you first, and then to Boris.
Sorry. Yeah, I think so. And actually, if you peel it back, I think the incentives between us and the airlines and the airlines and operational efficiency and sustainability are perfectly aligned. On the operational side, as Erin said earlier, every pound, every kilo taken out is fuel safe for them, and that's 40 to 50% of their operating cost. On the sustainability side, if you look at what's coming the airlines' way, and by the way, this is a group that's lost $125 billion last year. It's expected to lose $50 billion this year. So I have some sympathy for them trying to be lean and mean. But when you look at what's coming their way, between emissions trading, between fuel taxes and surcharges, there are a lot of sort of environmental costs that are going to be imposed on the airlines. So it's absolutely in their interest and that's why they're putting the money where their mouth is to invest in innovation and invest in sustainable solutions, because it's the framework in which they operate.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Apologies, we're just getting a little bit of bad sound quality on that, so I don't know whether you wanted to. We got what you said, but I don't know whether you want to just take a look at that, maybe by muting for a second. Boris, let's come to you on that sort of that compromise between being sustainable and still being able to give the passenger what they want.
I think the compromise is possible. Of course, if passengers are not feeling well anymore on the airplane, they will not fly, and our market is gone. So we need to take care about our passengers. It's important that they feel well. And that's the goal of deal, that we have happy passengers. Nevertheless, the connection from the passenger to the supplier is a long way. And at the moment, a lot of requirements are more focused on the classical things, safety and weight and the price. At the moment, there is not enough benefit for a lot of innovations to come out due to the hard price competition in the market. So also things from the organization need to change in the next years, that there's more benefit really to develop innovative projects and a way of sharing the benefit within the industry.
Okay, thank you. That's great, Boris. Thank you. I mean, let's come back to the question of weight. We talked about this has come up in previous answers, but let's focus a little bit more on what's the potential the industry has, the cabin industry still has for cutting the weight of products. Gary, let's come to you first. What potential do you think there still is to take weight out of the cabin, either through, I don't know, new business models and new ways of doing it, as you alluded to earlier, or simply by coming up with new designs and new materials?
Yeah, I mean, there's always opportunity, and I think what we're going to find now is an even greater drive that will kind of take those opportunities and sort of accelerate them as sort of like a catalyst, really. And I think you're right, Modo, when you kind of said in two streams, really. There's you can take product and we can reduce weight, and we can still do that, and we can take product and we can change it a bit. And that will reduce weight too. So I think we have to consider both those things to try and look at how can we take weight out of the cabin. So, you know, where I was mentioning earlier on, you know, looking at what products future customers might be considering, we might be able to put forward a product which is actually a better product for them. Maybe changes the product offering, but takes weight out, like seats without tray tables, like no galleys and stuff. We definitely need to supply some water, but we can change those things, and stepping back, we can offer those things in, and I think one of the things to think about is that you know, if I looked at myself 10, 15 years ago, I'd put all the rubbish in the bin, you know, just be one bin. And now I feel terrible about doing that. I have to take the rubbish and I put it into 5 different bins, and it's a mindset change that, you know, my generations has gone through, and you know, we're not going back. You know, it's happened, and I think we've got passengers. That's going to happen now with our passengers. So when we have to think about, okay, what passengers are being used to, but it's not necessarily what they need. It's not necessarily what we need for the next generation, and you know, for our passengers. So I think that's one thing that we can challenge and question what we're doing inside the cabin to see if we can take these big blocks and change them, which could dramatically remove weight. The other way is, for sure, like we're developing new materials. We're seeing some really cool topology being done at design stage, where we're optimizing designs for weight efficiency. And then we've got additive manufacture. We've got new materials for additive manufacture that are coming through. You know, already there, but there's more happening right now. So my guess is that we're going to find that sector just, you know, exploding with opportunity, and that's going to give us opportunities to reduce weight. There's no doubt. I mean, right now, if you take getting back to seats, for example, you know, typical economy seat might be about 10 kilos right now. There's no doubt we can get it to sort of 6.5 kilos with a few tweaks, and that's all with today's technology. If we look at tomorrow's technology, we can challenge it even more. But to sort of come back to Boris's point earlier on about, you know, there's lots of innovation, like deals, you know, spend a lot of time innovating, and there's, you know, at the innovation stage, you're coming up with ideas and products, which of course you've got to make commercially viable. That takes a bit of time, but because the business models aren't over time, it's sometimes difficult to get those things through. So maybe we should think a little bit about, could we change the business model? Instead of buying product, could we lease product? Could we do things where, you know, the cost of that product is spread over time based on the benefits it gives to the environment and the commercial benefits it gives to an airline. And then if you looked at a product over a 7-year cycle, you might come up with completely different solutions that might be more expensive to manufacture, but might be more sustainable and lighter.
Okay, Boris, what are your views on weight? I mean, without giving too much away about Deal's sort of next generation of products, is there still a lot of potential to take weight out of some of the stuff that you and your competitors produce?
Of course, there is potential. Like I said in the introduction, 250 kilogram potable water with using gray water reuse. That's basically weight you save in the cabin. So we can look to all the systems and try to rethink the systems, what the customer really needs, and how we can make this solution easier. So within the systems, there's a lot of potential, or reusing heat from cooling elements or whatever. And on the material side, of course, we have new technologies like vacuum insulation panels, which can make sidewalls lighter and thinner, giving the passenger more space and save weight. So from both sides, there are possibilities to go on. And also for the recycling then, having particle foam solutions instead of composites at the moment, they are lighter and easier to recyclable. There is a lot of potential in the cabin for further weight reduction and saving fuel by this in the end.
Okay, Erin, do you have a view on, materials are one thing and designing lighter and lighter materials, but is it sometimes just about thinking out of the box and changing the whole concept of, as Boris said, with reusing water for flushing lavatories?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we think about the big picture, right, we can't get the weight to zero. We know that. And there's a reason why in the long term, we're very focused on propulsion technologies and fuel solutions for our industry, but weight will always be an important part of how we become a more efficient aircraft. And in the near term, it is the single biggest driver of how we become a more efficient aircraft, right? It's where we can introduce changes immediately with those new technologies, whether it's a thermoplastic or composite or something else. I think there is a lot more opportunity in that space. I think there's a lot to be explored. And I think Boris made a wonderful point about the fact that, this is R&D, right? This is fundamental. The great news is technology, innovation that changes the world. That's what we do in aviation, right? We have incredible engineers that know how to come up with completely new out of the box ideas. And I think it's important that we draw on every bit of idea that's out there. I know at Collins, we launched literally called a launch pad for ideas around sustainable solutions. A lot of it's coming in around weight reduction, opened it to every employee. Some of the coolest, most out of the box ideas, and I can't say what they are right now, but some of the coolest ideas that have come out of that have come, I'll say, completely from sort of out of the ordinary, right? Not your traditional development process, and being open to those new solutions and doing those trials and really inviting that kind of innovative solution. I think it is how we're going to make a drastic impact, not kind of 20 years from now, but in the next 5 years and 10 years.
Can I just add a little thing, because we're talking about the weight and the cabin, reducing that obviously makes a big difference to the environmental impact, but the operational efficiency, we are flying aircraft. Sometimes we're flying them with hardly anybody in. The load factors. And if you started to look at sustainability and said, okay, there's sustainability with an aircraft, but what is the amount of the carbon footprint of the person? And if you're starting to fly a cabin half full, then that dramatically changes that. So maybe we might find that at some point we're going to start measuring the impact personally, and then the load factors and how we deal with that as an industry become quite a big driver. And I know it's not an easy one to fix, because we got competition, we got people wanting to hang on to slots, and we got all this stuff going on, but and not all the public know what goes on, but it happens, and it's not, you can't say that that's sustainable. You just can't. So that's a big driver. So if we do start measuring it per person, then we really need to start thinking about how do we change the operation of our aircraft.
Brian, if I can come to you, Boeing obviously made a huge step with the Dreamliner, the first all composite aircraft in terms of removing weight. How much can the industry still do with weight, particularly when it comes to the inside of the aircraft?
Well, I think we heard it from the experts on the inside of the aircraft. There is still a lot on material technologies, on additive manufacturing, 3D printing. I gave some examples of what we've done in the past to fly some of those monuments and cockpit panels, et cetera. But I think we talked about circularity, we talked about recycling. I think the one thing we haven't talked about is sort of the full life cycle energy cost of production. And that's certainly something we're very closely focused on, as we're looking at total scope emissions. And, an autoclave uses a lot of energy. And so there's novel manufacturing technologies. I think Boris alluded to sort of out of autoclave, thermoplastic composites. So there's a lot in the material science world where we're very, very active around the globe. I'm sitting right now in Amsterdam, and we have a thermoplastic research center here in partnership with some Dutch universities. So, I remain very optimistic, because this is what we do. This is how we got to the moon, and this is how we're going to keep innovating. And back to Gary's last point, the good news is it's not good for an airline either to fly an empty airplane. And so the incentives remain aligned for this sector.
Okay, I'm just going to take a couple of very quick comments from the audience. These are not necessarily questions, but just to air these very valid points. Someone is saying, going back to seat materials and leather, is leather so bad for the environment? Why does it get such a bad press? Cattle aren't raised to produce leather; it's a byproduct. So perhaps leather is it's a pretty environmentally friendly product to use in seats. Another comment from someone, a Star Trek fan, I think. So until we have dilithium crystals powering aircraft, passengers cannot have their cake and eat it. And I think this is a reference to this whole debate about, yes, everyone wants to be more sustainable, but do they want, do they want to compromise on their onboard product and perhaps not eat their cake on board because there's no onboard service? So the industry needs to be bold, and compromise is needed. We're getting very close to the end of our session. We've got a few minutes left. I'm just going to ask everybody in turn, just in 1 minute or less, if possible, just to sum up their thoughts of where the industry needs to go in the next 10 years with regard to sustainability, and particularly with relation to the interior of the aircraft. Let's start, Erin, let's start with you. Be very quick, so we've got a few minutes left.
I'll do my best. I think the good news is where we need to go in the next 10 years is where we are going. I feel extremely optimistic. I think technology innovation absolutely is the answer. I think weight reduction and all of the other sorts of technologies and solutions are where we need to go. And I think, to some of the point we talked about earlier, I think the next step is collaborating across this industry to bring those technologies to fruition in a way that is safe and aligned with our customers' need, our airlines' need, our passengers' need, but as quickly as possible, because there are great solutions coming, and we just need to get them there to help meet this global challenge.
Excellent. Boris, industry's priorities for the next 10 years?
Yeah, we need to make big and small steps in parallel. We need to work on new propulsion systems like hydrogen, which will be a major step. But there are also other things like cabin innovations where you can go small steps in retrofit or line fit. And we need to have the combination of both approaches, incremental and revolutionary, over the next 10 years to have a much more sustainable flying.
Excellent. Okay, Gary, the next, between now and 2030, what can the industry realistically do to make it to reduce its carbon footprint?
Well, I think, like Erin said, we are already trying to push, and we're already doing that. But I think we need to be a little disruptive as well. I think we really need to challenge what the products that are going out there are, and communicate that with customers, and actually get a dialogue going with customers, because we are a little in danger of being the bad people when it comes to the environment. And I think we need to not just look like we're doing something, we need to do something. So I think communication's key. And I think the other point, and again, Erin put this forward very much so, was collaboration. It's such a complicated subject, sustainability. It's really difficult, and the only way we can fix it and understand it is to collaborate and get that information out there. So as we're designing new products, we can understand what is sustainable and what isn't.
Great. Okay, Brian. 30 seconds. What are the
Yeah,
the next decade?
No, we're going to keep focusing on safety and on sustainability at the same time. And in the end, this conference is about the passenger experience. I think Gary made some great points. Everybody did, but Gary on there will be pull from that, and we're ready for it. We're going to keep innovating together. There'll be 19,000 new airplanes over the next 10 years coming into the market. So talk about an opportunity to innovate and introduce all this stuff we just talked about right there on the product itself. So thanks for a great panel, Murdo.
Thanks a lot. Well, we're at the end of our time. I'm sorry we weren't able to take more of your questions. We've got some fantastic questions. I think this is obviously a subject we'll be returning to time and time again in subsequent passenger experience conferences and at AIX generally. Before we close, I just wanted to remind you of the next passenger experience conference session, Strategies for a Digital Revolution in the Cabin. That goes live in about 90 minutes time at 16:30 CEST. And just a reminder also that all the PEC sessions will be available to stream after the event. So right on time, I'd like to thank all our 4 panelists today for giving so generously of their time and their expertise. And thank you as well for joining us. Take care and goodbye.